Hi everybody, it is June 1st, but it is 12 degrees here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and it's gonna rain today, and I'm so happy about that. I also thought of this book because I am meeting a friend and a beautiful artist this morning for breakfast, and I thought I better get in my art before I go out for breakfast. And then I saw this book on my bookshelf just as I walked into my art room to record this video. And I quickly flipped through. I haven't looked at this book in ages, Art Before Breakfast by Danny Gregory, A Zillion Ways to Be More Creative No Matter How Busy You Are. And I really love this book. So I just opened to page 19 here, How to Develop a Creative Habit. And there's just some tips in this book about how to fit art into your life when you are a busy person, which most of us are. This I love because I've just started working out because I'm prioritizing my health. I would much rather paint than go to the gym, but my goal as of the last month has been fitness. And I put out my runners and I put on some of my exercise wear when I get up in the morning, and it really helps me get into that mode of, if I see my runners, if I'm wearing them, I'm more likely to do something active and fit it into my day. And it's the same thing with art. And if you have, watercolors sitting around, crayons, if you have little ones in your home, you just probably have a lot of extra art supplies that you don't even realize that aren't being used. Maybe they're in a drawer somewhere, but get them out and put them in a place where every day you will see them. So even if you have a very small space, just putting out some colors that you love, or even just a pen and pencil and having that accessible. That's just a great way to remind you, hey, 5 or 10 minutes a day really does add up. Number 3 here, don't go crazy with art supplies at first. I definitely did not follow that rule, and I'm not following it now, but I do agree with this. You really don't need to start with a lot, and that was a beginner mistake that I had made. Enough about this, but such a great book, very inspirational if you're just kind of finding you're a bit stuck in your creative practice and making it a routine. I wanted to talk about my landscape modes that I've been really interested in lately, and I use my inspiration file, so those art journals, to go back and look at all the mark making that I love and incorporate it into my landscapes. So as you can see, this one has a lot going on. There's a lot of color. There's metallics mixed with my watercolors. I've used everything from Posca pens to water-soluble pencil crayons to the Neocolor Caran d'Ache crayons. And I really love this piece. And it's just sort of stepping out of my routine where I do love this background. I'm ready to do mark making over top. But this is, again, my traditional art poetry style. It just comes to me so easily. And I almost feel like I'm a bit too tight when I paint this style right now. So before I do mark making over top of this, I'm just trying different landscapes. So what I wanted to do is just use this as a reference for mark making and start to do some mark making over top of this. This is one of my art journals that I'm working out of. And I really am just craving orange in this area where there's these inky botanicals. So I'm going to use my paint pen. And without being too perfect and not worrying about whether or not I'm staying in the lines, I'm just gonna use my acrylic permanent paint pen and fill in some of these leaf shapes or these petals. They're very abstract. I purposely left one where I didn't fill it in, and I like to do that. I like to use a slightly different shade. So this is a bit of a lighter orange. Sometimes I like to pull in a metallic. I already have a lot of metallic with the gold moon and the gold watercolor in here. So I thought, well, I could pull in like a bronze metallic, but I just want to go with the lighter orange. And if I finish this piece and I go back to it and it just doesn't feel right, I can change the color or I can lighten it up. the cool thing about art is it's all about layering. So you can go back and almost edit your work, resolve it. And what I want to do is also show you, there's so many marks you can make in your work. One of my favorite pens is this it's called Una Posca. It's just a fine tip black Posca pen. You really need to just purchase a few affordable pens and play around with them. Even the dollar store has a really great permanent pen, so it doesn't have to be expensive. And what I want to do right now, so I really like how I've added the orange in there. I want to add some more of these botanicals. So I really like this particular composition. Just going to look through my camera lens to make sure we're kind of looking at the same thing. This art journal is quite big, so it's hard to fit everything in. And I don't want to lose my resolution, so what I'm going to do is do this line here, and then maybe one right here. And I like to start with a big rounded petal. And then again, I'm not being too precious about it. I'm just trying not to smudge it with my hand. And I'll do this one upside down because again, I'm not going to smudge it. And when you do things upside down, you can actually get into a bit of a rhythm, which might be different than the rhythm you had when you were working right side up. And it's very appealing to the eye to look at something that may have been painted in a slightly different way within the same piece. I like to do a lot of line work within my leaves, and I'm gonna wait and do the base color of the leaves. So in this one I used a navy, I used a light gray paint pen. In this one I used a combination of a light yellow paint pen as well as some white. And so just sort of looking back, looking at this right now, what color do I want to put in here? I'm just gonna see, do I want to add a pop of color? I don't think so. I definitely want maybe a slightly darker color. There's dark over here in the watercolor. This is very light. This is lighter, this watercolor background. So I might do a slightly darker, I might actually go black or dark navy. Let's just see which one. This is a black. I'm gonna do black. And what I want to remind you when you're using these paint pens, if you do work with paint pens, you need to go over them a few times. This one is quite good quality, but it just depends on the texture of the watercolor layer that you're going over top of. But I find often with even really great paint pens, acrylic pens, you need to go over your work more than once. And it can be a little bit of a nuisance, but in a way it slows you down, but it's sort of a meditative process. And it really makes a difference in the final piece. So if you're just painting for yourself and playing around, you don't have to worry about going over it again. Although, because I sell my work, I like to go over usually 3 or 4 times. So what I would do is go back to this. I won't make you sit through this, but you can see that it's orange. But when I go over it again, look at how much more vivid it is. So you can kind of play around with other supplies as well. I'm going to show you a trick that I use. I know I have all ranges of artists that have been watching my videos, those that are just starting out and those that have been painting for quite a long time, but just want to sort of figure out some different tricks. And I really appreciate that they want to see sort of how I work, and we can all learn so much from each other. What I did is I grabbed this Neocolor Caran d'Ache 2 Aquarelle, so water-soluble crayon. I love these Swiss crayons. And you can see I smudged that with my finger, but it's not a big deal because I'm not staining the lines. But this just lightened up that area. It gave it a slightly waxy texture, a bit of a different texture, and I really, really like that. So there's so much you can do just playing around with layering and lightening things up, darkening things. It's a lot of fun. What I'm going to do now is, because this is dry, is go in and add my line work. There's a couple different pens I like. Again, I use so many supplies that I will do a supply video at some point in time, and I try to list the ones that I use regularly, and I try to talk about them. But you really have to, look at what you have accessible to you. And there's so many awesome reviews on supplies online. And the artist Laura Horn, who I absolutely love, I've taken so many of her classes. She does wonderful art supply reviews. And so you can check out her YouTube videos and her courses, because she will cover probably pretty much everything I'm using. I know she's a really big fan of Daniel Smith watercolors. I do like Daniel Smith watercolors. They're an artist grade watercolor, a little bit more expensive, but there have been colors that I have bought, and they, coming out of the tube, the binder, something about the color, the binder, I couldn't get the pigment to mix up, and every now and then you'll get a bit of a dud. So, I mean, that happens with all art supplies. But I really like to use a variety of supplies because within the brand, they can all be quite different. Just looking at where I want to go from here. The cool thing is, if I decide, I just don't love the white lines over this, I can just go back in with my black paint pen and redo it. So when it's dry, I can just paint right over it and change the color. So that's the beauty of mark making over top of watercolor with acrylics. Just looking at this, I love this line work here. It's very, very light and subtle. I really love that. And so for that line work, I really like these Uniball Signo pens. And I am just gonna see, where do I wanna go in with my line work? Just trying to decide what would be a good place. I kind of like the idea of maybe even going right through here. And I want to do some line work this is a very rounded petal with lines in the middle. I left this one without lines. I think because these are rounded, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a slightly different shape of petal. Just trying to decide. So when I'm looking at my art and my composition and I'm pulling a painting together, I want a variety of shapes. So if, for instance, in this landscape, this is a fairly big botanical. It's got rounded leaves. And then I go over here. This one has slightly more narrow leaves, and it has these buds with lines, which I love. It's a bit smaller than this one. And then this one is very different. It's linear. It has a lot of movement. It's coming down on my page, whereas this is coming up and out. These are more centered. So just something to think about as you get more comfortable in your practice. And, again, it's intuitive, but you can also teach yourself what you love and, kind of plan it out a little bit. I have quite a bit of gold in here already. So I'm going to use this particular one, and I'm just trying to decide, do I want to do, maybe I'm changing my mind, something really big in here. Something maybe I've never done before in shape, maybe more rounded shapes instead of the long shapes. So, and then do I want to come up or do I want to come down? So that is my question right now. I actually see wanting to come maybe down somehow. And so I'm going to come from here and I'm going to do just some sort of rounded shapes. I like that. It's very loose, and I'm going to go a little bit bigger, and I'm not overthinking it. I'm just kind of playing around, and I'm using a variety of size in my line work. And I really like that so far. I'm going to add in a smaller one over here. I love that bronze over top of this beautiful magenta. And maybe I'll turn my book and I'll do one over here. And I'm really pleased with that. As far as next steps, I really like the line work coming down from this little moon where I put dots around it. And do I want to add? I think I want to add another moon, but maybe, or sun, whichever you think it should be. It's in the eye of the beholder. I'm going to shake up my beautiful turquoise Posca pen. And I'm going to use this because I just like to use that for a very round shape. And I'm just deciding, where do I want to put it? I kind of want to put it like with this line, and then I can go back in with the line over top. Do I want that size? Maybe a little bit bigger. I kind of want just a big moon right here. So I'm gonna, whoops, and there's a happy accident. I have quite a bit of spillage there, but that's okay. We'll factor that into our design. So I'm just gonna round out the edges here, and I'm gonna round this one out a little bit. I can always go in later. And that's actually quite interesting, even if I don't fill it in. I'm kind of liking that. So I might actually call this a happy accident. Where do I need to fill it in? I'm gonna leave it like that. I really like that sort of asymmetric shape. Okay, well that was fun. And then what else have I done in here? I've been really into rainbows lately. These are sort of like atypical rainbows. It's just a fun thing to add. I'm just looking to see, you know what? I haven't added my polka dots. So I'm gonna zero in on a couple places of darker watercolor or paint where I can add contrast. And I'm just deciding, do I want it in here, or maybe I'm gonna do the navy, I think. I'm squinting my eyes. No, I'm gonna do down here in this area of that rusty watercolor, sort of adding polka dots to what I think of as the soil in this. And I'm gonna do a few bigger ones because it adds interest. It adds surprise to the viewer to see slightly irregular circles or dots. I love that. So I'm happy. If I had this color somewhere else, I would repeat the polka dots. So what I could do, because I know what I love about my work and how to pull it together. So that's something with practice every single day and painting for joy and learning what I love. I've gotten to the point where right now I'm gonna add in some watercolor because I wanna repeat this beautiful rusty color in another area, maybe over in this area of my painting. And so I'm going to, I believe, I'm gonna wet my brush, and I believe I used this sort of rusty color here in my watercolors from Kauai. This palette's called, or I got it at theoceanpaper.com. I've had a lot of questions, but I mix my watercolors, and these might be a little bit mixed up, so it is hard to get the exact palette. I am gonna just add in some of that watercolor. I need a little bit more water on my brush. That's quite a bit of water, and that's okay. And I'm just gonna get more pigment. And you can kind of go right over top of the acrylic, and it won't necessarily dry. There's sometimes a resist with the acrylic unless it's a bit wet, the paint pen, because acrylic paint is plastic essentially. I I like that a lot. I'm gonna darken it up a little bit, add some interest by dropping in some of it so it's a bit spotted, and deciding, do I want to make it a lot bigger? It's about the same size, so my eye really likes one section to be bigger or smaller, so I might just go big and like bring it in all the way over here, and maybe down, maybe kind of carving out a bit, almost as the reductionistic method, I believe it's called, where you paint around the underpainting images. Not sure what it's called, but it's just fun. Okay, so, and I'm gonna bring it over here a bit. I added a lot more of that color, but I like it more when it dries. I'm gonna add in my white dots just to bring a bit of cohesiveness by repeating the design element, by repeating the polka dots. And looking at this, I feel like I want like this to be maybe a darker gray within, and maybe the buds will be a different color, but I'm gonna use my slate gray Posca pen and just do one and kind of look back and squint. Do I like it? I do really like that. And again, I'm not aiming for perfection, I'm just filling it in. And I know that when I have time later in my day, I can go back to it and I can make it, I can change it, I can paint over it, I can change the colors. In this one, I didn't do sort of a leaf that stands out. So what I'm gonna do is maybe make these little buds really bright. Just trying to decide what color do I want them. I feel like those little buds could be maybe like a lighter turquoise. Let's just see what we have. Maybe a lighter blue. I think I want to do a lighter blue. So I'm using my Neo Color crayon and I'm giving this some texture. And I went right over the lines and I like how they're popping out a bit underneath. And I'm really, really pleased with that color. I may add it in again somewhere else. I am gonna add it. See this white space right here? I'll just see if you can see on my camera. This white space right here is calling my name for some blue. And I can take my paintbrush to this water-soluble crayon and make it more of a watercolor effect, or I can add interest, which is what I'm doing right now. So interest to the eye of who's looking at this. So this to me is interesting because when I hold it up, I can see a slightly different texture within the transparency of this watercolor within this area, which is more pigmented. So variety is so appealing to me in art anyway. So I did the light polka dots. I'm gonna go back in and do them up here. I could add darker polka dots, you know, in here for some depth and around this area. I do like the idea of a resting space for the eye. So this area is my resting space. I've decided that now. I love this beautiful light pink. I feel like this is just such a beautiful spot in the painting. You could even take a mat and frame it and just, you know, decide with that frame, what else could I put in here that emphasizes that beautiful resting space? You know, maybe something more down here or over here, but just having this area as a place of rest. Immediately, I just see this mark making here with this bronze pen. I want to do some solid marks. And so you can see within the white here, I added this pen on some of the leaves, and I really like that. I like that solid bronze look, so I'm just gonna add in some smaller shapes. And you can sort of see them shimmer. And I can go back in later, you know, if tonight I just need to do something meditative, I can come back to this landscape. And right now I see, you know, I might go over this. I felt like that white pen was a little bit too thick for the size of these leaves. And so right now it's dry. And so you can just go in over top and change it. How amazing is that? With art, you're never really stuck. As an artist, you have freedom to layer and hide things underneath. You know, if you put writing in your work, you can cover it up. Maybe you had a really rough day and you don't want to talk about it, but you want to write it out. Grab some, you know, 98-pound, 140-pound paper, do some writing, and then go over top with color. Maybe you want to go over top with watercolor first. See the words coming through, meditate on it, let it go, and then cover it right up with an opaque acrylic paint. I don't always practice what I preach, but that would be something that would probably benefit my mental health, is doing that. I'm going to add in another one over here. And just deciding what we can do now. I think I'm going to do the same thing. I actually have decided I might want to make this a gray. I can't decide if I want to do a lighter gray, but again, I'm looking at this. I like this top one, so I'm going to leave that one, and I'm going to do something different with this one. And it's quite nice as is. I'm going to bring this line down and do right over top of this white. I just felt like doing that. I like transparency, so a shape where you can kind of see what's going on behind it. I love the Neocolor Caran d'Ache. These little dots are amazing. This yellow, two-toned yellow. And what could I do in here that might be similar? What colors do I want to use? I'm feeling like a light, bringing in a bit more of that light pink somewhere in here. So I'm going to grab 2 shades of my Neocolor crayons, and I am going to do this little mark, which is kind of like a thick dash, and I just want it to be in here. So I'm going to go in with the pink. I'm putting a fair amount of pressure, and I'm kind of like looking, I want to go on my other page because I want these pages to be one landscape in this art journal. So I really like that, and I'm going to repeat this somewhere else, but I'm going to add my peachy color beside it. And these are great too because you can kind of blend them, you can go over top of them, you know, if you decide, I'd really like this to be orange instead of pink and peach, you can do that. You can go back and kind of almost edit it, blend it out. But I really, really like that. And I feel like this space over here, I've decided this is not a rest space, and I can repeat those little marks. I'm going to start with the peach this time. And it's so interesting how the color comes out with the color speaking underneath. So over here, this really is like, the pink almost looks like this fuchsia color, this violet color. But over here, the pink and peach look a bit different because the background is this lime green. And it's just really cool to kind of see how the color works when there's a different background color, a different underpainting color. So I really, really like that. I could add maybe, there's a bit of a smudge here. I don't mind that, but you know, say that you're still working on your perfectionistic, you're leaning into your perfectionistic tendencies because that's the only way that you can create right now. That's how I started, is I used to want it to be perfect. And I've gotten so far away from perfection, and it has made me a much better artist and a happier human. And when I look at the work where I was trying to be perfect, I don't feel it. It just doesn't speak to me. Whereas, you know, and again, that was more like, this isn't what I would call perfecting a painting so much. It was just a smudge, and I just feel like it looks better with these marks. It really fits. Another thing I want to do is maybe variety in this Botanical, so I could just color one of them in with a solid color. I'm just trying to decide what color that would be. I really like the idea of like a Titan buff, like an off-white. I don't know if I have one nearby. I'm just gonna see what colors I have. You always want to work with what you have. I don't see it right now. I might go back to that. So when this is dry, I'm going to do the white polka dots. I'm going to go over top of this orange again. I'm going to brighten everything up. I did go over this white line probably 3 times. And I'm just going to sort of like sit with this. And right now, before I sign off, is there anything else just I want to do right now? I think I like this line work so much. I am going to add back gold line work. So I'm going to take this Uniball Japanese pen, and you can see that I had the mark making here. I love the line work. I love this really faint looking, almost Hawaiian flower coming through. And this, and I have a lot of marks. So I do want to add rainbows, some kind of a rainbow. And I just want to really loosely put something over here. So I'm just going to kind of come up and come down. And I'm going to do some line work in here after, but I'm just getting the shape down, this shape that's kind of coming to me. And I'm purposely shaking my hand. I have a natural tremor, an essential tremor. If I have caffeine, it makes it worse. I've had caffeine today. But I've learned to embrace that in my art, because the natural tremor sometimes, it used to frustrate me when I was trying to do line work. But again, if I'm embracing imperfection, wabi-sabi, asymmetry, irregularity, I'm embracing the wiggle that comes to me naturally. And I like it so much that right now I'm sort of emphasizing it. It was funny, when I worked as an RN, I worked with seniors for a number of years, looking after osteoporosis patients. And if they'd come in for their blood pressure checks or their routine checkups, I would often get the comment, "Oh, don't be nervous, dear," because, you know, when I was doing the blood pressure, they thought I was nervous, and because my hands were shaking, but it was really an essential tremor, so kind of funny. And there's my timer. I'm going to keep this video short because I want to meet my friend for breakfast. So thank you for staying with me. I hope you were inspired in some way, and we'll see you soon.